water bottles, it's vodka.
A lot of it.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to see you again tonight. Welcome to the second of our Baritones and Beachballs discussions of the operas that you'll be experiencing in the upcoming 2010-2011 season and the fascinating stories behind these operas. Tonight, we're going to be dealing with an exciting, grandiose, maddening, confusing, breathtaking, and completely original 19th century epic. A work of art described as being, alongside the poetry of Alexander Pushkin and the films of Sergei Eisenstein, the quintessential expression of what it means to be Russian. In short, we're going to examine Modest Mussorgsky's provocative and extraordinary masterpiece, Boris Godunov. Originally composed in 1868-69, this work has one of the most complicated revision and performance histories of any work in the opera canon. Other than Don Carlos, in fact, nothing else even comes close. It was conceived by its composer as something entirely new, an extension of music into the realm of simulated speech, an utter rejection of the Western idioms favored by the international school of Anton and Nikolai Rubinstein and Peter Tchaikovsky. As Phil G. Goulding writes, Mussorgsky's goal was a simple one: to express the soul of the Russian people, without initial regard for what pampered singers wanted to sing, what money-seeking impresarios wanted to produce, or what a paying public like you wanted to hear. Now, does this mean that we need to steel ourselves for a long Russian evening as flavorful as a stewed potato? Not hardly. Boris is not merely a work of genius, it is a true work of theatrical art, one capable of transcending the not always linear storyline, the odd detours into the world of Russian folk music, and a huge cast with too damned many people named Dmitri and Fyodor. It is magnificent. It is tender, haunting, powerful, disturbing, and overwhelming. I have never seen this opera performed on stage before. It's going to be my first time too. But I understand that there's absolutely nothing else like it in opera. Nothing. Joining us this evening are two very special guests. To my immediate right, Dr. Christopher Anderson, who is the Associate Professor of Sacred Music at SMU's Perkins School of Theology and the Meadows School of the Arts at SMU. He specializes in performance practice, the organ in church, and society. I've never seen organs out on the town, but I think we're making interesting.
We'll do that after this hour.
Okay. Western music history and theory and 19th century musical culture. Now, among his many professional distinctions, Dr. Anderson is the recipient of the Max Miller Book Award for his 2003 publication, Max Reger and Karl Straub. His research on late Romanticism has yielded frequent essays for journals in the United Kingdom, Germany, Sweden, and the United States. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Christopher Anderson. Dr. Lonnie Harrison, who is Assistant Professor and Russian Section Head for the University of Texas at Arlington, teaches a range of topics in Russian language, literature, cinema, and culture, and guides the UTA Russian Study Abroad program. His specialties include 19th and 20th century Russian literature and culture, 19th century philosophy and intellectual history, and the life and works of Dostoevsky. He translates Russian scholarly works and has presented papers in Ukraine, Switzerland, Canada, and across the U.S. To my far right, please welcome Dr. Lonnie Harrison. Gentlemen, thank you for taking part in this conversation tonight. Now, one last note, and this is from me to you. Although I am well aware that the correct pronunciation of this opera is Boris Godunov, it's going to tax my brain to put on the brakes every single time I have to say it. So, with your permission and the indulgence of all our guests, I'm going to refer to the opera from here on out by the Americanized title, Boris Godunov. And I hope, you know what's coming, don't you? I sincerely hope that that will be good enough. Okay. All right. I would like to begin our conversation tonight with a quote from Modest Mussorgsky himself regarding his Fellow composers. Fellow composers for $60, yes. He wrote, "When I think of certain artists who dare not cross the barrier, I feel not merely distressed, but sickened. All their ambition is detail, one by one, carefully measured drops of prettiness. A real man would be ashamed of doing so. Devoid of wisdom and willpower, they entangle themselves in the bonds of tradition." End quote. So what does this tell us about the man and his self-imposed mission? Who'd like to take that first?
Dr. Anderson?
Well, let me try out this microphone here. First of all, I'm really, really happy that the Dallas Opera is doing this opera. It's one of the most radical pieces, and it has one of the most radical genesis of any kind of work like it of the time, and certainly from the 19th century. I think the most important thing to understand about Mussorgsky is that he is a very, very, particularly toward the beginning of his career, a very, very radical kind of thinker. He wants to think outside the box, and he wants to portray himself as an outsider in all kinds of respects, from the standpoint of being a composer, from the standpoint of being a musical thinker, from a standpoint of being a thinker about the way language works, and the way language works with music. And of course, he was given to kind of hyperbolic statements anyway, and that's a very good example of one. I've never heard it, but I think it's very much right down his road. Two of the things that he wanted to avoid the most were, well, it all falls under the umbrella of an avoidance of the westernization of Russian culture. And two of the things he wanted to avoid the very, very most were, for him, if we're talking about the musical theater, one is the conventional lyricism of Italian opera. That's the first thing. He doesn't want anything to do with that. And the second thing that he wants to avoid very much, and he's quite unfriendly to it, I think even more so than the conventions of Italian opera, are the conventions of conservatory invented music education. That is something that he absolutely despised and was very much against the establishment of that in Russia.
Well, and actually, it's hard, because when we think about Russian music, I mean, it seems so incredibly established, and it seems like it was there forever. But in 1850, there were no conservatories in Russia.
No, not at all. No, the first one is 1862, which was established by Rubinstein. Anton, not Arthur, but Anton Rubinstein established the first one in Petersburg. Yeah. And so Mussorgsky, given his life path, even if he had wanted to go to a conservatory, he would have had to ship out to across the border somewhere else, and of course people did that, like Lincoln did that.
Right.
But coming up when he did in his generation, he wouldn't have been able to do it anyway, which was just fine with him, of course.
Yeah.
He saw it as a kind of German takeover, the study of counterpoint, the study of conventional harmony, tonal harmony, the study of forms,
Yeah, he used to
sonata form,
refer
and so
to
on.
music for German generals, or really
Music for German generals,
yeah.
exactly. He wanted to stay as far away from that as possible. Now, of course, when I went to school and went through all those music history classes, one thing that I was taught, and one thing that you get taught, is precisely this, that Mussorgsky wanted nothing to do with it. He built his system, his musical system, his musical language from the ground up. But of course, nothing comes from nothing. So, of course, it's not true. It's just one of those kind of hyperbolic statements about music history. But there are German things, there are French things, there are Italian things, and Mussorgsky's a very, very good and astute student of all those languages at the time. But from the standpoint of propaganda, from the standpoint of what he wanted to say, of how he wanted to portray himself, those things are very, very much at the distance.